came prepared tonight.
Okay, it is, excuse me. It is 10 after 6, so we will go ahead and get started. Like I say, we start these, I appreciate everybody coming. We start these things with a prayer and a pledge. And Bobby Harrell is offered to give her.
No, I was asked.
I was asked. Well, I said, would you? Because the lady who was going to isn't here yet. And she said, yes, she would. So thank you.
You're welcome. Lord Jesus, we just thank you for another beautiful day. We thank you for opportunities to meet like this in a country where we can. Lord Jesus, we just ask that you bless our time. Help us learn about our Constitution. Help us learn about our rights. Help us learn how we can keep this country as great as it is. We thank you for each other. We thank you for all the opportunities you give us to raise our families in a place like this and to just be able to praise and worship you wherever and whenever we want. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Some of you weren't here. Last night we actually had another gubernatorial candidate, Steve Bradshaw, here yesterday. And yesterday obviously was a special day. It was Pearl Harbor Day. And it was 80 years ago yesterday that the United States was attacked. And if you look at World War II, there was over 400,000 of our military, that's not counting civilians and all that, and that's not counting the worldwide, but over 400,000 of our people sacrificed their lives for us, for the freedoms that we have. And I think we all need to recognize that. We are, I'll say it, we are at war right now. I firmly believe that. And we can't let those lives be sacrificed in vain. And so it's our turn to do what it takes, to fight for this country. And to me, when I pledge allegiance to the flag, I'm pledging allegiance to what it stands for. And right now, it does not stand for the country we are living in. It stands for the country that we were founded under, and that we have fought for, and that our relatives have died for. And so, I thank you, everybody, for coming to these things, but that's why we're here, to protect our freedom. It's our turn, and let's do what we must. So with that, I appreciate that. A couple of quick reminders. Dennis Marsden is going to tell us and teach us some things on the Constitution, just some reminders. Next week, next Wednesday, we're going to have Brian Smith here. Brian is running for Congress. He's running against Mike Simpson for District 2 of the state, okay? It's very important. Simpson has been doing some things over the past while that causes a lot of people a lot of great concern. And if you've been paying attention, it should likely cause you some concern. So we do, any challenger that is there, we need to make sure that we know who that person is and what they represent, and do we trust them or not. That's a federal, this is a person we're going to send to DC. So we need to vet them as best as we can, and I ask that we do your research, definitely do your research, and come prepared to bring people next week, and definitely ask Brian hard questions, and again, don't be shy about it.
Doug, what was the last name?
Pardon?
Brian's name.
Oh, Brian Smith is his last name. Okay, and there is, there may be some agenda still left, but it's on the agenda here. And next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, Ammon Bundy's coming back, okay? And he actually called me and wanted to come so he could talk to some of the lab folks and all of this, and so that we're letting him do that. One thing that happened, I'll have to say, is Ammon was our first candidate that, you know, we had basically interviewed or we had here. I think we've learned as a community here a lot more of how to ask questions, what to do, and not be shy. And so from that perspective, I again ask everybody to come, listen to Ammon. He has a pretty good story, but then ask him the hard questions. Again, like anything, they represent us. They're asking for, they want to go to work for us. We need to know their backgrounds. We need to know what they represent. We need to know that we can trust them. And so with that, I encourage us all to keep coming. It's going to be really important, obviously, for what I was just saying. So with that, no further ado, I will turn things over to Dennis. Dennis is one that likes to keep on scheduling me. I'm sort of fluid. So anyway, give Dennis a big hand. Thank you. You want me to run this for you? There you go.
No. I guess you can hear me okay, probably.
Better with that?
Better with that, and you're
Very
going to
good.
need it with that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you for being here tonight. I see so many faces that I see every week, and sometimes 2 times a week, and sometimes 3 times a week. So thank you for your energy and for your commitment to our liberties. I appreciate what Doug has been doing. I met Doug because I came to the rally on the Broadway Bridge back in, I don't know, June or July or something, just before Ammon Bundy came. And I really appreciate the hub that Stand Up for Idaho has created. Now, all of you know how committed I've been to Stand Up for Idaho and all the meetings I've been to. But in this matter of law and the Constitution, it's only half of the equation. I'm just telling you. If you don't understand the Constitution and don't know your personal relationship with the Constitution, you're missing half of the meal. And that's what this is about tonight, is the other half of the meal. It's just an introduction to it, and if you find it interesting and of value to you, then I have a few resources at the end of the presentation that you might find helpful. So, so what I have to say here tonight is not legal advice. It will sound at places a little bit like legal advice, but it's for educational purposes. I really encourage you to do your own research. Go to the books yourself and either confirm or refute the claims that I am sharing with you here tonight. There we go. Freedom is not free. Now, if you have any trouble seeing this because I'm standing in your way, please feel free to move to another seat, okay? Because everything I'm talking about is going to be up here so that you can see visually what it is I'm talking about. First of all of you know about Rosa Parks. In 1955, Montgomery, Alabama, she got on a bus. They told her to move from the front seat, and she said, "No, thank you." She wasn't mean, she wasn't nasty, she didn't hit anybody. She just stayed there and waited for the police to show up, and she got arrested. I'm going to show you a video just like that. Wished we had one of Rosa Parks doing it, but we don't. The fellow in this film is, his name is Garth Gaylord, and he's in northern Idaho. So we've got more people in Idaho standing up than just down here in Idaho Falls. There's some people doing some really good things. This is about a 10-minute video, but it's very entertaining and very educational.
You don't want this struggle, man. Court or do something like that?
I called the Supreme Court yesterday and nobody answered.
We can try again, but either put it on or we'll phone call.
Did you guys know the Supreme Court suspended jury trials? How many people are sitting in a jail, separated from their families, sitting in a cell, and they haven't even had a chance to defend themselves in court? From September to December, people have been sitting in jail, unconvicted, because these private Supreme Court justices
You can save yourself some trouble and just put it on.
just submit to tyranny. All you have to do is submit to tyranny. And you get your rights
This is
back.
Pete Barnes,
You get your rights back. So you get your rights back.
Trespass out of the Justice Building. At 324 West Garden.
Are you guys zombies? Forcing that some people? You think it's good? Saying segregation is good, huh? You guys, we have a holiday called Martin Luther King Jr. Day. He broke the rules because there was segregation. This is segregation. You're saying because I don't believe in the mask, I don't allow it in here.
He doesn't have anything.
Don't you guys celebrate Martin? The federal government celebrates Martin Luther King Jr. He got arrested over 30 times.
Non-compliance 101. That's how it's done.
I'm so disappointed in the pedestrians that are standing there watching this, instead of taking a stance and taking their masks off. If every one of them took their mask off, that would happen.
And sat down next to him. I agree. I agree.
All that now.
My bad, sorry. Thank you. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
What she just said was she's disappointed with all the people around there. Now, you saw the bullies get into their bully mode there, didn't you?
Yeah. And
Okay? It's because they, number one, don't understand the law themselves. And the other spectators also are ignorant of the law. And when you see somebody who's having their rights violated, you can join the fray in a peaceful manner. He was absolutely peaceful throughout the entire thing. I'm just going to tell you briefly a little experience I did. I don't want to take much time on this. I sued Natural Grocers last year because they refused to take my money at checkout because I wasn't wearing a mask. They called the police on me. I was calm, civil, respectful. I ignored the police when I was talking to the people behind the counter. Now, my lawsuit, I lost a trial on it, okay? And I maybe should have appealed it, but that's another issue, okay? The point being that if you don't stand up and defy them, we acquiesce and they think that we agree. That's called implied consent. Okay? This is what it looks like to assert your rights. Boy, I just applaud Garth Gaylord and the group he's working with up there. I'm so proud of them. They're Idaho boys. Okay? And girls, you know about the lady that took her kids to the playground in Boise? She was the first one in the fray. It was a lady, first one in the fray, okay? So, now, freedom is not free. So, here's a group of what are called belligerent claimants in person. This word came from a case. I had to go look it up. And find the case, and I meant to put it on here, but I don't remember it right now. It was an Eastern case where it was dealing with the courtroom right to not self-incrimination, didn't have to witness against himself, and that's what the case was over. But they coined the term belligerent claimant in person, and all these people, Scott Smith, John Tiggs, are in Loudon, Virginia, and all of you know about that. Loudon, Virginia is where they had the school board meetings over the transgender boy that molested a girl in the restroom. And then there was a second follow-up deal to that. Scott Smith, the fellow on the right there, his father was his daughter was the victim of that crime. But they arrested both of them in a school board meeting. Rosa Parks, you know, on the right, she passed away recently, I think it was pretty recently. James O'Keefe, if you know about Project Veritas, the FBI raided his home here recently and confiscated all of his computers, phones, files, that sort of thing. And then Garth Gaylord, the hero we just saw in the picture just now. So, rights are not available to the passive person, nor the person who is ignorant of his rights, nor to one indifferent to his rights. Rights can be retained only by sustained combat. Rights are acknowledged only when insisted upon by a belligerent claimant in person, one who is persuaded to surrender his rights rather than make a stand simply loses his rights. He did not resist, he acquiesced. And that's where that term belligerent claimant in person comes from. United States versus Johnson, Pennsylvania, 1947. So constitutional rights constitutional law, you and your rights. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So, when we talk about constitutional rights, we're really talking about what are called common law rights. You hear the word common law, and the common law refers also to court decisions. So, for instance, the Supreme Court makes a decision regarding a particular question of law. The Supreme Court is telling us what the law is. They're not making the law, is the point of that. But the common law refers to the customs of the ages and what we naturally see between each other as being your rights versus my rights. So what we're talking about here tonight is common law. So common law in this sense of the common law or the common respect we have for each other kind of originated out of the Roman Empire. As Rome was conquering the tribes and nations immediately around the Mediterranean, what they found was each of these tribal communities had their own set of laws. And they were just what you and I were taught in Sunday school. Respect your neighbor, don't steal their property, don't kill them, and so on and so forth. And that's the common law. It's what we've thought of as being the law of Moses as well. It's the same basic thing. But Rome itself, there in the middle of Italy, they had what was called the civil law. And the civil law is what we know as statutory law. That they take these common law principles and they script them line by line into a bunch of rules and regulations. And what an example of what a rule or a regulation would be, if you drive down the highway and the speed limit is posted at 50 miles an hour, that's a rule. If you go 60 miles an hour, it's like playing Monopoly or some other game, you're breaking the rules. And that's called an infraction, okay? If, on the other hand, at the common law, if I take your property from you intentionally, that's called a crime. Because there's an actual damage that takes place. There's a harm that's caused to the person against whom I take their property, okay? So the Roman civil law, though, set up a bunch of rules that if you don't comply, okay, non-compliance. How many of you saw the movie Non-Compliance? If you haven't seen it, it's available on the internet. It's called Non-Compliance. Chrisanne Hall. Chrisanne Hall. It's well worth seeing. But anyway, if I go down the highway and I go 10 miles over the speed limit, if I go 1 mile over the speed limit, I've committed an infraction. And if a police officer catches me and pulls me over, I have to pay a penalty. In the common law, when I damage somebody, if I were going down the highway 35 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour zone, and I could have prevented an accident, but I hit somebody, that's a crime. And, or at least it's a negligent act, and I have to make restitution to that person. That's the common law, right? So that's the difference between common law and your rights and statutory law. And this period depicts about 100 AD of the Roman Empire. So when we talk about common law, we're talking about rule of natural law. We're talking about self-government. The best government is self-government. Self-reliance. We take care of ourselves. We're not asking the state to take care of us. We have, like, as we mentioned, the 10 Commandments, the Law of Moses. We have common law contracts. And an eye for an eye. You know, we think that that's really brutal, but the reality is an eye for an eye means that we have to be responsible. Under civil law, we'll get there in a minute. Under civil law, you have limited liability. You've heard of that. Corporations, limited liability companies, and so forth. And then when we damage somebody, we have to make restitution. And then at the common law, we have substance. And that's why I've got a picture of a coin, and that certificate is a silver certificate. It used to be you could take the silver certificate into the bank and hand them a silver certificate for $5 and they'd give you $5 worth of silver or gold. We don't do that anymore. There's no substance. So the common law is canonized in the Bill of Rights. Isn't that right? That's where it's found, in the Bill of Rights. Where do we have it in Idaho? It's in the Idaho Constitution. It's the first article of the Idaho Constitution, and it's called the Declaration of Rights. And it's about 22 sections long. So there's a lot covered in the Idaho Declaration of Rights. And it's something we all should be familiar with. Now, when we talk about the Constitution of the United States and how important it is, the Idaho Constitution is just as important to us as Idaho citizens. And it's the real strength of the common law for an Idaho citizen. And we'll get to that a little later. So, the Roman civil law is statutory law. And basically how the statutory law developed was between 1776 and earlier. Actually, do you know when they make court decisions, a lot of times in Supreme Court cases, they're going clear back to Magna Carta. And they're talking about Magna Carta, and they're talking about the British Bill of Rights. There was a Bill of Rights in England. I think it was about 100 years before our Bill of Rights. I think it was 1669 or something like that. There was a Bill of Rights in England. So this isn't new to America. And the individual states, as a matter of fact, most of them had their own Bill of Rights, and they were different from state to state. But when we talk about civil law, we're talking about privileges and immunities. What's the difference between privileges and immunities and rights? There is a difference. So, all of you guys are wearing the Patriots hat here on the left, and we're standing out on the street with signs that say, no mandates. Okay? Leave us alone. And we've got the other people that are some yelling at us saying, take care of us. We want you to mandate for our well-being. Okay? Common law is the guy that's saying, leave me alone. Civil law, take care of me. And that guy on the left is an Idaho citizen, or he's a Texan, or he's a Wyoming cowboy. Okay? They are state citizens. So, when you read the Declaration of Independence and the Federalist Papers, everybody here is familiar with the Federalist Papers, it talks about the term is used, American citizens, a lot. If you've read the Federalist Papers, it doesn't talk about United States or colonial citizens. It talks about Americans and American citizens. I'm an American citizen. Okay? I'm also an Idaho citizen. Okay? Something happened in 1868 following the Civil War and the Declaration of Freedom to the slave population. The citizens went back to their states, and what happened in the southern states is even though they had been officially freed, they didn't have any rights. And so in '68, they passed the 14th Amendment, which in effect created a new kind of citizenship called Citizen of the United States. Prior to that time, when you read the Constitution, Article 4, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, it talks about the several states having their citizens. And it talks about them going from state to state, that they would be afforded the same rights that the citizens in those states had when they went there. And so it was, the Constitution was written for state citizens. And what happened between about 1920 and 1935, we moved from common law to civil law. In 1926, Congress they codified all of the laws in the U.S. basically. And some things that came out of that was license plates, driver's licensing, marriage licensing. Did you know there weren't marriage licenses much before 1900? Does anybody know that? Everything was done by the churches. And in fact, if you look at this one 1924 Racial Integrity Act, it was passed because there were interracial marriages beginning to take place, or that had been taking place. And what they were doing was the federal government passed a law that said if you are two different races and you want to be married, you have to have our permission. That happened in 1924. So let me ask you a question. Is marriage between two people a contract? Yeah? If I have to have permission of the state to marry my bride, is the state a party to the contract? Good point. Shouldn't be. Well put. Shouldn't be. But you wonder why the state of Idaho, and when I use the word state of Idaho, I'm not talking about Idaho, I'm talking about the state of Idaho. The state of Idaho is the agent of us. Idaho's legislature and our governor and our Supreme Court and all of the agencies of the executive branch that are associated with that governance is our agent. Okay? Under the common law, I have the right to marry my wife between us. And if I can do that with the church involved, or I can do it just between us. That's called a common law marriage. Now you think of a common law marriage, you think, well, they lived together 7 years, and then we see it as a common law marriage. And that is one kind of common law marriage that by custom, whether they claim to be husband and wife or not, we accept and acknowledge that they're husband and wife. But two people that marry, they make a contract, and I tell everybody in this room that we are married, that is a common law marriage. We've never been intimate with each other, other than a kiss goodnight. That was a joke. Okay, so never been intimate, okay? No sexual relationships, but we make a contract. It can be written or it can be verbal, and we put out to the community that we're married. The fact that we let the community know, we announce it, that's a common law marriage. Okay? Now Idaho in about 1995 passed legislation that said common law marriages are no longer valid in the state of Idaho. What does that mean? Can they infringe my right to contract? Can they? I think you know the answer. Can they infringe my right to contract? The answer is no. It's a common law right. It's a natural right. They can say that because what they don't want to do is, if I don't get the licensing from the state, they don't want to have to give me money through the welfare system. That's really all that's saying is, we don't want to subsidize your common law marriage. And so as a result, we don't recognize your common law marriage. And that's what that means. But I don't want them to subsidize it, right? Because when they subsidize something, strings are attached. So, all right. So 4 events can occur that strip citizens of their rights, okay? These are really important. Number 1, bad laws get passed. An example would be Rosa Parks was told she couldn't get on the bus, right? That was discrimination. And Garth Gaylord was told he couldn't go in the courthouse without a mask. Those are bad, and I'm using the word laws very broadly, very loosely. They're not laws. A law that doesn't have constitutional conformance is not a law. From the day they pass it, it's not a law. Not just when you challenge it. Okay? So, that's a bad law. the second one, when laws are applied to the wrong people. There's a case in here that we'll mention later briefly. It is on a tax law issue. And the court said that laws that are otherwise valid and constitutional may not be valid against certain persons. And this was on a particular tax law issue. I'll give you a good example. Let's suppose that I know how to cut hair, and I invite you into my home to cut your hair. And I charge you $20 to do that, okay? The question arises, do I need to have a license to do that? And the answer to that is no. And I'll explain why. I can go get the training at the beauty school or wherever you get training for that kind of thing. But if I don't get a license, let me back up. If I do get a license, it means that I have brought the state into a relationship with me. I have created a contract relationship with the state, just like I did with the marriage license. And I have agreed that I have to do certain things under the terms of that agreement. The other thing that happens is if I open up a barber shop down on Main Street and I put a sign out front, that's called engaging in public business, in commerce, engaging in commerce. And it falls under the welfare clause of the Constitution. And the courts have said, and I think they're wrong, but that's what they said nonetheless, that if you engage in public business, that they can demand that you get a license to do that. But if I go in my home and I do it by invitation, so I come out with an invitation or a card and I hand it to everybody in this room and to everybody I know, and you call me and say, I want to come over and get my hair cut, that's not public business. That's private business. And it is not regulated by the government. It's beyond their reach. Okay? So you have to get creative with that idea and say, how does that fit my circumstance? So, mowing lawns. Let's suppose I mowed lawns. I could take brochures and I go door to door and hand them to people, and they call me and we set up a relationship, and that's a private contract. Okay? And the state has nothing to do with it. Okay, next one. When citizens surrender rights in exchange for privileges. There was a case in 1945-ish. It was Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. The Jehovah Witnesses, now they had a city ordinance on the books for over 20 years there that said, if you go door to door selling things, you have to get a license from the state as a peddler to do that. So the Jehovah Witnesses challenged it because they got sued. They got sued to go get a license. And they said, we don't have to have a license to do this. And the Supreme Court of the United States agreed with them. They said this is a protected activity. What you're doing is a religious activity, and your selling of Bibles and brochures is an integral part of your religious faith. And they didn't have to get a license. They ruled in their favor. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. Okay, the last one. So, what happens if the Jehovah Witnesses had gone in and gotten a license? They would have been surrendering their right in exchange for a privilege. And that's the way that game's played. So, if the lady, or me, that's doing haircuts in my house, I say, well, gosh darn it, I guess I need to go get a license, and I go get the license to do it in my house. Not only have I surrendered my right for a privilege, I also have given them regulatory authority to come in my home. Okay? All right. And when citizens unknowingly abandon their rights as Idahoans, this, in my opinion, is what's going on with the mask mandate and the vaccine mandate right now. When you go to the federal government and you file a suit or a claim under the Civil Rights Act, for example, if I ask for an exemption, what is an exemption? An exemption means that I'm asking them for permission to do something that I otherwise have a duty to perform. That's what the word exemption means. Okay? Okay. Well, see some eyes closing around. Anybody want to stand up just for a second? Yeah, you got a question,
I do.
Julie?
I wondered if you wanted me to wait till the end though, but
Yeah.
it applies right now, because I've talked to some of my neighbors. One was a hair cutter, and she really was okay with this, and it sounds like, she's not aware of the fact that she was giving up her right, but she was okay with having a license
Yeah.
because she thought it was protective of people, so that they wouldn't have hair that was left over in the comb from the previous person, that kind of thing. And so she was good with the regulations. And the
Good point. Good point. Let me tell you about regulations. I believe we have the right to travel on the roads with or without licenses. Okay? Those of you that know me that well know that that's how I do it. Do I abide by the speed limit on the road? I do. Whether I'm bound to by a contract or not. Anytime you sign an application with the state, that's federal or Idaho, it is the creation of a contract. Your signature is a waiver of some rights that you otherwise possess. I guarantee your signature is the giving away of your property. Now, your property may be intellectual, it restricts your activities in some way, or it takes property from you. But anytime you give your signature, I'm telling you, it is a compromise to your rights. How many times do you sign your signature with the state? Wow. Okay? All right.
Dennis,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If a solicitor came to my house, could I say, I want to see your license?
A solicitor?
I don't know if Idaho has a peddler's requirement here. I don't have a clue.
Oh,
I don't know the answer to that. Yes, ma'am.
City of Idaho Falls has a license.
Okay. She's telling us that they do have some kind of a licensing requirement in Idaho Falls. Not Animate, maybe. Yeah. So, what has happened, in fact, quickly, a few years ago, 10, 20 years ago, the city of Salmon passed a law that said everybody has to have a business license. Well, excuse me, what were they doing the day before they passed that? Huh? It's called money and it's called control. Okay, it's called, and more money to more money, okay? So, before that, so a business that had been operating on the main street of Salmon without a business license for the last 100 years, they just had to get up right then and go get a license, right? Is that true? No. No, the evidence is they had been operating there all that time and they're grandfathered. There was no obligation for them to go get a license, in my opinion. I think that's like Garth Gaylord here. That's a fight worth fighting. Yes?
I was just going to make a comment. For many years, we had to have a city license from the city of Portland.
Yeah.
And it always just felt like extortion.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
They did us no good.
Yeah.
There was nothing, because I didn't even hardly operate in the city.
Thank you for sharing that. All right.
It felt like extortion.
Yeah, yeah. No, so let's go back to the question here, and it was a good point about the somebody that cuts hair. It gives some kind of protections in there. Well, shouldn't I be protecting my clients anyway? Don't I have a duty to my client to make sure that the hair is taken out of the comb from the person behind? That's a case of called buyer beware, right? That's the free market. If you come in there and you see filth everywhere, maybe you better find another barber, right? All right. So, talking about federal privileges then as opposed to rights. We have all of these things being offered to us. In fact, I meant to mention this briefly at the beginning of this. This was really, really incredible. Last night at Steve Bradshaw's deal, he got up and he is currently a county commissioner. And they had received a $2.2 million check from FEMA, from the federal government. And he looked at it and he says, we don't know what the terms of this agreement is, but he's a smart enough guy that he knows that's an agreement. And if they cash that check and put it in their account, he doesn't know what they're being bound to. What are the regulations associated with that? Well, this is what he read. Recipients understand and agree that the funds dispersed under this award may only be used in compliance with Section 603C of the Social Security Act. Now, when you get Social Security money, now this is another discussion. I won't get into it real deep, briefly, but only this, that when you're getting money from the federal government, there are strings attached. And you may have been defrauded into signing that contract when you got that Social Security number. That's another discussion. We'll get into that some other day.
And
But
they
you-
don't put the fine print in there that 3 or 4 years down the road, they're gonna come to you to get that money back.
I believe that's true. In fact, that's part of this right here. The recipient shall maintain records and financial documents sufficient to evidence compliance with Section 603C of the Act. The Inspector General shall have the right to access to those records. This is the federal government has rights to access those records. So what's in those records? Your vaccine passport, maybe? Your Social Security information? Who knows what all those records are that are in there? But it goes on. Oh, and it says if you don't comply, that the money needs to be returned. Or any money that you don't use for the specific purpose under 603C has to be returned. So, Mr. Bradshaw and his cohorts up there created a trust fund account, put the $2.2 million into the trust fund. So that if they don't feel good about the terms of the agreement, they're ready to cut a check and send it back to Joe Biden. So, the recipient also agrees. Does that sound like a contract? And what's the evidence of the agreement? The acceptance of the check. Okay?
They don't need a signature, just the signature of the check.
Yeah, if you cash the check, that's implied consent. Absolutely. Yeah. So recipient also agrees to comply with, get this, all other applicable federal statutes, regulations, and executive orders.
Wow, Mandy.
Does that sound like a police state? He has now created, and this gets worse, okay, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. This is the last one in here now. You would think if they are creating an agreement between you, there's some kind of an agency agreement. In other words, the state of Idaho is operating as an agency or an extension of the federal government. Wouldn't that make sense? In other words, if they send money to the elementary school, and the elementary school teaches their curriculum, they are acting as an agent to the state, right? The United States expressed, now, in all of these terms, we have what are called terms of art. And what that means is that one word that we commonly think of having a certain meaning in the law or in the statute actually has a different meaning. That's called a term of art. This is very interesting because in here, most of the time it uses the term United States. But at the very end, it says the United States of America. I guarantee when they use a different term, there is a reason for using a different term. The United States of America, in my opinion, from my understanding, refers to the republic and not the federal congressional authority. They're two different things. Most of the time in this statement, it uses the word United States, but there at the end, it uses the United States of America. I believe it has a different meaning. It doesn't happen by accident when they change the terminology. But back to the earlier comment I wanted to make. Oh, and you wonder why the INL is doing what they're doing and violating all of their employees' rights? Okay, But real quick, the United States expressly disclaims any and all responsibility to the recipient or third person for the actions of recipient or third party resulting in death, bodily injury, property damages. We're going to give you the money, we're going to tell you how to use it, but we are not responsible. What do you think of that?
I think they left the door open, they should send that money back.
They did. Well, I don't know if they sent it back yet or not, but the point is we have a few honest politicians who understand the law. And that's something else I wanted to mention just real quickly here. Mr. Bradshaw knows how to read.
Yeah.
Now that's a unique skill.
Yeah.
I saw the same thing with Janice McGeehan and also with Ammon Bundy. They both got out the documents and they read them. I like all three of them. Okay, I'm going to vote for the one that I think has the best chance of winning. But I like all three of them because all three of them talk my talk. They understand the law. And they're not afraid to pick up the document and read it. Yes?
Didn't he say that the check came like 7 weeks before they got that
Yeah.
document?
Right.
Yeah.
Got that.
Yeah, that's right. And so, yes?
Why did Bradshaw think he was getting the check?
Well, they received the check during the COVID stimulus money.
That's when, why? The question's why.
Somebody had to file a grant. At that time during the COVID, they put out a notice.
Right.
If you're needing funds,
Right.
money, please submit.
I don't know who initiated it.
Well, Sandpiper did the same thing. They got $450,000.
Well,
Now they have to have very detailed records.
they'll spend the $450,000 on the
And then they're
damn
gonna go
records.
back and audit your books. And if there's one flaw,
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I just wanted to point that out. I look for politicians that aren't afraid to say, I don't know, or I don't remember, I'm going to go look at the source. Okay? Trying to remember it from memory. I feel kind of silly. After Garth's thing that I showed you up here, I've been looking for the opportunity to do some activism, and I was kind of thinking of doing this at the Bonneville Courthouse here. So I was doing a little research on it, and I had some early documents, and then I went and checked the update on it. What it was the Supreme Court mask mandate for the courts that was issued I don't remember, early this spring or something, but I went and checked it on November 23rd, they had changed it. This picture we watched tonight happened 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
1 week ago, the Supreme Court changed their mandate. Maybe they had an impact. Do you think you can make a difference? I think there may have been other things going on. I'm sure there probably were. But do I think this had an impact? I think it did.
Yeah.
You saw all of the officials in that courthouse. They didn't know what to do with this nitwit. This guy is out of his mind. The attorney coming through the security check said, save yourself the trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's an ignoramus. And I mean that.
No, he's a bully.
Well, they were all bullies, kind of. I mean, they were respectful. He made them even laugh. I love this guy. I love this kid. Just an innocent guy doing the right thing for the right reason. Okay? So here's the problem. We have a monkey, and this is the monkey that most of Americans' leaders are mimicking. The federal government is sending money, and they're sticking their hand into the coconut that's chained down, and they're getting a hold of the macadamia nut, or whatever the nut is that's in there, and they can't get their hand out now. Everybody knows the story, right? About the monkey that they want to catch these monkeys. I think it was for zoos and stuff like that. And they came up with this brilliant idea. Drill a hole in the end of a coconut, put their favorite food inside, and then bolt that coconut down. The monkey just squeezes his hand in there enough to get a hold of it, but he doesn't have the sense to let go of it. And they could catch him without hurting him. After all, you don't want to damage the property, you don't want to hurt the slave,
There you go.
right? He's not as valuable if he's been damaged, if he's damaged goods. So, federal privileges and immunities and state privileges and immunities. I guarantee there are both, and you just don't know what they all are yet, but that's why we're here tonight. We're here to talk about what your rights are versus what privileges and immunities are, because they're not the same thing, okay? Come on. I don't know why that. What's going on? Anybody know better than me about this? Let's see. There we go. Okay. So, when we're talking about natural rights, what are we on here? We're on 14. I'm talking too much. Okay. So, does an action violate a natural law? Okay. What are natural laws? Common laws, right? I have to respect you. You have to respect me. Now, if we read the Declaration of Independence, it talks about unalienable rights, right? And it says among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's pretty straightforward, wouldn't you agree? I think it's pretty straightforward. So whenever I interact with government and they're telling me that I have to do something that is restrictive of my liberty, but that activity doesn't hurt anybody, gee, I've got this red flag going up in my head. And you should have that going up in your head too. Okay? Does a constitutional provision violate a natural law? Okay? Now, in the state of Idaho, at the risk of being a little bit way out on the edge, just for an example. For example, in the state of Idaho, back in 1890, when the Idaho Constitution was passed, we had polygamous Mormons living here in the state, right? Well, they passed a law then as part of the Idaho Constitution which says they can't do that. Okay, you can't have polygamy, okay? But the question arises, just for the sake of argument, is that a violation of common law contract? I think it may be, because many countries in the world recognize polygamy. I'm not endorsing or criticizing, I'm just simply saying I think there's a principle of law there to be considered, and I think it's something that somebody could argue. But why would you want the marriage license? In fact, there was an argument about the gay marriage thing, and I know that's on the fringe of certainly this group here, but if a common law relationship, whatever it is compromised by a state marriage license, why would you do that? If they can come in and take your kids and they can regulate your family relationships, why would you get the marriage license? Just a question, okay? So, now the next one is more at home for us. Does a statute violate constitutional provision? Okay?
Can.
Okay, and we've seen that. Rosa Parks, Montgomery, Alabama. They had municipal codes that said the blacks had to sit at the back of the bus, and the state laws, the Jim Crow laws, said the same thing. And the whole region, all the federal courts agreed to that. It had to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 steps up there to get to the Supreme Court before the Supreme Court said, no, this is not constitutional. So statutes that look unconstitutional should be challenged, in my opinion. Okay? In fact, I know it.
That's right.
I take it back. It's not opinion. Okay, so we go down from a statute to a regulation or an executive order. How's that for you? If an executive order, now, but here's the problem. If you accept the money, you accept the terms of the agreement. You cannot contest the rules that attach to the money. That's the problem, guys. And that's what's happening every day to our state, and it's the same thing that's happening to you personally. When you acquiesce or you accept the funding, you accept the terms. Okay.
Okay, I got a question.
Yes.
So,
If your governor accepts the terms and the conditions of an agreement, does it apply to you?
Well, my opinion is you can contest that, and the way to contest that is way at the end of this here, where you send documentation to the governor or whoever it is that's imposing the order, and you say, I do not consent. That's my opinion. At least you have given them legal notice that you do not support this, and that you've given them notice that you are contesting that. I believe that is valid.
Could you repeat the question?
The question was, if the governor imposes an unconstitutional mandate or order, is it personally applicable to you? Did I get that right?
Well, if he accepts a federal demand and.
Gotcha. Does it apply to me?
Right.
By extension, if the governor accepts money from the federal government, by extension, he accepted it, does it extend to me as well? And my opinion is, the earlier you contest it and you give notice of your disapproval of it, I think you have better legal standing. That's my opinion. Okay. So, finally, if all of the above is no, in other words, it doesn't violate natural law, it doesn't violate the Constitution, it doesn't violate any of these organic laws, and it's no to all those, what about if the law is applied to you in error? Is the law applied properly? That's really important. That's a big question. And, you know, my notes here. Okay. The answer to that question is, laws apply to specific groups sometimes. And if you're not part of the group, no, that law doesn't apply to you. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a tax law case where that very question was brought up. Now, in the case of tax law, generally the courts say that if you are contesting the application of the law, you have to pay it, and then you have to go through the administrative process to get your money back. Wow. That's the way that generally works with tax law. Okay, so it's more difficult because of that.
The other problem that they're having,
yes,
is that they're passing these illegal laws, which should be checked before they're enacted or made. Does that make sense? They're backwards. They're taking something, passing it, not getting a check first, and then it's valid for everybody, even though it's illegal.
That's a really good point, but I'm going to tell you that American history is full of that, all the way back to the signing of the Constitution.
It's kind of backwards.
I don't know if it's backwards or not. In fact, in some cases, the IRS or some group, some agency says, we would like to test this law. Would you please violate it, and we'll go to court and challenge this. That is, and I think it's a legitimate way to do it. Frankly, I think it's a more honest way than usually is done. I think it's an honest attempt to let's test this law and see if we've interpreted the Constitution properly. Does that make sense? Yeah, they do that. Yes.
On the previous slide, I think the number 4 was talking about, does a regulation or an executive order violate constitutional law? Did you cover that? Did you touch on that?
Maybe not entirely, but for example, if we have a natural law, what's the natural law that has to do with vaccines? I have the right to control my body. Okay? Whether we're talking about a biochemical, don't need to use that other foul word, that fake word, okay, or to put on a mask. Do I have the right to breathe freely? I think I do, right? Okay. So, if the natural law, and the Constitution, by the way, says that. If you read the Idaho Constitution, it says that we have a right to strive for happiness and liberty and property. And those things, I believe, are contained. That is an implied right under that provision of the Constitution. That makes sense? Okay. So, a regulation or an executive order, even if it's otherwise considered valid, let's suppose that an executive order did apply to somebody, like OSHA.
Right.
Right? That makes sense, right? There's a reason there. And it applies to OSHA, and people are working inside of that industry. Does it apply to me, the guy that's out farming, or the guy that's out working in his own yard? The answer to that is no, it doesn't. Executive orders apply to executive agencies and branches of government. Yes?
All right, so the DOE has said, because they are a federal group, and they had to comply with the executive order, they have basically said, all right, or they came out and said, if you're a federal contractor, you have to comply. All right, now, they've said you don't. This happened yesterday. So the question now is you've got a lot of people that were working for the contractors that have been fired, and what is their recourse? They refused to take a shot, they got fired, and what happens to them now? Are they, I mean, what's their legal abilities?
Okay, let me bring that to what we saw with Garth Gaylord. If Garth Gaylord had gone in here and said, okay, I'm not going to bother you, and he walked back out of the building, or if he went inside and he put on the mask and left it on, does he have what is called a cause of action? No. Because he did what? He acquiesced, right? He complied. Okay? Now, he has standing, and he can sue them for a violation of his rights. Whether he wins or not, he has standing to sue for the violation. Your INL people are the same way. If they've had the right violated, they have, I would presume that they have standing to sue for wrongful discharge. Now, that could go under two ways. It could either go under Title 42, the discrimination protections under a federal code, Title 42, or it could go under an Idaho action as an Idaho citizen. Now, if I put on Title 42, I am doing it as a citizen of USA. If I do it under Idaho law, under Article 1, did I lose my deal? All right. If I do it under Idaho law, I do it as an Idaho citizen. And I am protected by the Idaho Constitution. And Idaho, did I put that on wrong?
No, you're right. You're right.
If I do it in Idaho, I'm doing it as a citizen of Idaho. And I'm protected under Article 1 of the Idaho Constitution. So I have a choice. It is a choice.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
So, I got lost in that explanation a little bit. I apologize. Did I answer the question? Okay. So, I have another quick video. This is a 7-minute video. Are we all good? Anybody tired? Need to take a break? Ben. Anybody want to take a break right here? Y'all good? Okay. All right. I want to show you real quickly another brief video. Now, this gentleman, his name is Carl Miller. I found his video on several different sites on YouTube, and I found him on Rumble. I think he's on Rumble as well. This guy was a Vietnam vet, decorated, and they studied the Constitution in Vietnam. They said, something's wrong here with our republic. So they studied the Constitution. He's been teaching it for I don't know how many years. He's probably dead now. This video is probably 20 years old, but what he said is just as spot on accurate today as it was when he taught it. He looks a little bit casual, but the guy knows the law. And if you're interested, you just go to the Know Your Constitution, Carl Miller, and he's got 3 different sessions. Each one of them is about 2 hours. I probably watch these things every time I get something new out of them, at least 6 times. It's very good.
Good evening, folks. I want to thank you for inviting me into your home tonight to talk to you about an extremely important issue to you. I basically am here to talk about the United States Constitution and our government and some of the principles that you need to understand most thoroughly so that you can have an effective opportunity to exercise your constitutional rights. The whole purpose of this is that you understand that these rights come from God. Okay, that they are God-inspired. God is the one who endowed us with these rights, and that this Constitution merely offers a legitimate program to protect that all of us can have the rights equally, and as long as we respect our neighbor and allow them also to have the rights equally, the protections are going to last forever. And the reality is that we are going to get thoroughly into your Constitution. We want you to find a Constitution wherever you can. We are going to basically take you step by step through some of the most important parts of this Constitution so that you can better exercise your rights in a timely fashion. Now, the facts are simple. If you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. And that's just the way it is. And you certainly couldn't exercise those rights timely if you don't know what they are. So what's going to happen is they're going to tell you what your rights are, and you think they're going to tell you in your favor? Certainly not. Now, we've come a long way to put this program on to help you. By the way, my name is Carl Miller. I want to thank you again for inviting me into your home. We're going to proceed with vigor. I should tell you a few things about me, that I'm a prior service soldier. I served 3 combat tours in the Republic of Vietnam. I should tell you that I was a participant in the top secret project called Blue Book, where the officers in the jungle smelled a rat in the woodpile, and they decided to pull their top soldiers aside, and they said, come on over here, we want to talk to you. And they took their top soldiers in the corner, and they started teaching them things like duty, honor, country, pride, and core. They taught us history. They taught us all kind of programming as far as what's going on in our government. They taught us the Constitution. We had to be able to rattle the Constitution off just like we would any manual of arms. And this all took place totally top secret so that we wouldn't offend any chains of command or any presidential problems similar to what happened between John MacArthur. And the bottom line is this was taken totally upon their own, shall we say, careers to pull this thing off. And this happened all throughout a lot of the military services in Vietnam. Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, they all pulled aside their best people and they started putting everything on and teaching us our Constitution. So I'm going to try and instill in you that flame that was instilled in me over 25 years ago, which I've been transferring ever since. I've been fighting tooth and nail to defend the Constitution. I've helped thousands and thousands and thousands of other people do the same. I teach people how to be their own counsel, to stand up in courts of law, and be able to exercise their constitutional rights in a timely and effective manner. And the good Lord willing, I'll be able to keep doing it. So why don't we right now try and get into some parts of the Constitution. The most important thing that I can teach you about this Constitution is the importance of reading it. You must read the Constitution and understand what physically is involved. You must know your rights and timely assert them. That is your burden. If you do not, then a legal term called laches incurs is in full force. Laches is a legal term which is defined as a laches is a species of action wherein a party of reasonable intelligence and integrity, having a right to take an action as is prescribed by law and having failed to timely do so, loses all right to proceed. So what is actually happening out there, folks, is that laches is occurring because most people don't read their Constitution and know what's involved. So then you are left to being told, well, that's what it means. Okay, so you just got to do what you got to do, and you're told, and they're going to tell you in favor of them. They're not going to tell you in favor of you. So it's better for you to read the book and understand what's in it. It's not a very big book. I highly recommend the book. You can get several versions. A lot of times you contact your congressman. My congressman, Dominic Vincentini, state senator, supplied this one for me. John Kuhn, a libertarian candidate, has supplied several also. Some of these folks, just check with your local congressman or state rep. A lot of times they'll just give you one. If you cannot find one, go down to your United States government building here in the Detroit vicinity. It's called the McNamara building on the first floor. And what we do then is we go into the government printing office, and usually they're about $1. But I highly recommend you go get one. I don't leave home without mine. I usually have 3 or 4 of them someplace. And I hand them out also myself. I give them out to whoever. I think one of the most kindest things I can do to a person is give them this book and show them how it works. This book is kind of like a genie in a bottle. If you know how to stroke this book, I'm telling you, the genie comes out. And it usually with a force that it will be clearly recognized in any court in the land. Now that doesn't mean it'll be easy. You might have to work a little bit. But basically there's an argument, and it comes like this. If I violate your rights, you may or may not know about it. If you know about it, you may or may not be able to do something about it. If you do have an ability to do something about it, you may or may not have the financial wherewithal to go to a finished program. If you do have the financial wherewithal, you may not have the intestinal fortitude to go to a finished program. So most of the time, your governments and your abusive personalities in government or your corporations pretty much have carte blanche to injure you. Because in 99.9% of the cases, most people will not proceed. But every now and then, you run into that one hard nut, and he doesn't quit or she doesn't quit till the cows come home, and what happens is that person will prevail. And those are the people that are actually generating better protections and better constitutional rights for you. Those are the ones that are going to the Supreme Courts and the Courts of Appeals and what have you, that are pushing, that are spending their life funds to allow you to have the benefit. But if you aren't there to catch the benefit, then the benefit is lost. So we're going to get right into the Constitution. We're going to teach you some things about it. Pay attention, because we're really doing this out of an act of love for you, and we're hoping to God you're going to pick up on it and pay attention. Okay? Now, I'm going to put one Constitution down here so the folks can see it. I will open this up from time to time to demonstrate things to you. I will basically try and read out of another Constitution so that we can better show you some of the things that are involved. Now, it's important that you understand that this Constitution is in writing. It's important that you understand that it is a legal document, okay? That it was ratified by all of the members in a Congress together, right? And that document can be, you can get all the signatures on the document, okay? And it's important that you understand that there was an offer. Government offered to govern. There was a consideration. The citizens...
I'm going to cut that short.
I'm cutting that short. I just wanted to introduce you to him.
Okay.
If you'll take the time, I promise you'll find it really instructive and really empowering. There's a lot in that. Okay, Carl Miller. I'm going to breeze through some of this pretty quick here for a minute. The protections of a person's right to privacy is like the protection of his property or of his life, left largely to the law of the individual states. So if you have a right, a natural or constitutional right, if you want it protected, it goes through the state courts and not through the federal courts. It's under your state citizenship, okay? Just a side note, two quick things as a side note. In this document, this Social Security deal, recipient acknowledges and agrees that it must require any sub-grantees, contractors, subcontractors, successors, transfers, blah, 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 to comply with the assurances under 1 through 4 above, and agrees to incorporate the following language in every contract or agreement that they issue under Title VI. So this is why the INL and all these people that are getting federal grants are violating your rights.
Yeah.
This is why. Okay? Oh. Okay, I lost it. Sorry. Okay. So, if we want to know what your rights are, first of all, in the Declaration of Independence, they were called self-evident truths. If you feel like there's something wrong, you're probably right. Trust yourself. You have a right. And second of all, you're a beneficiary to the contract. The United States Constitution is a contract, and you and I are beneficiaries to it. You have a right to protect your rights under the Constitution.
Okay. Dennis, can I ask a question here before we
Sure.
go on?
Go ahead.
Because maybe this applies to what you just said and what you were talking about earlier about the religious exemptions.
Okay.
Okay, so were people actually writing religious exemptions, was actually acquiescing to an unconstitutional executive order, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so even doing that was acquiescing, and everybody should have just said, no. I will not comply.
I don't know that I have the answer to that, whether they should or shouldn't have, but what I do know is it is an acquiescence.
It's an
The
acquiescence.
fact that you ask their permission, just like going to the state for a license to cut hair, that is subjecting to their demand. It's acquiescence.
Well, we have 8 lawsuits now that have come through the court saying that this was unconstitutional, what Biden's doing.
Yeah.
So anybody that even did this they didn't realize. I didn't either. I was talking to people about how to write them.
Yeah, and I agree, and I was too.
Yeah, yeah.
But I knew better. But I
didn't know
but I knew that that's what they wanted to do. Okay?
Yeah.
They wanted it. People were looking for the exemption, so I was attempting to help them with the avenue they had chosen to take.
See, and you knew, though, I
Okay.
didn't know until right now that they were acquiescing.
When I filed my lawsuit, on the day it was decided, my son called me or sent me a text and said, "Dad, there was a decision out of Florida on the mask mandate." And the name of the case is Green versus Alachua, A-L-A-C-H-U-A. It's in it was in an appeals court. What it was a guy who was told by his county commissioners that he had to enforce the mask mandate. And he said, "I'm not going to." So they charged him with a misdemeanor under it, and he went to court and fought it in court. He lost at the court level.
Wow.
He appealed it, and the appellate court said, this is a violation of your constitutional rights. And it upheld that decision. So the courts, now, in his case, he filed it as a state citizen. And at the same time, there were many cases coming out of different states. There were a couple that came out of Louisiana where somebody challenged the same basic thing, but he filed it under Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which is as a U.S. citizen. They all lost. Now, it doesn't mean that as a state citizen in Louisiana, they necessarily would have won, because those are different jurisdictions, okay? Different courts see things differently, okay? That's just life. But he did win in a state court as a Florida citizen. Okay? So, all right. So, if we're looking for authorities on law, look to the Declaration of Independence. Learn it. Read it. Can I recite it? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by God with certain unalienable rights. They can't be taken from you. Period. Period. Exclamation mark. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, we have that in our Idaho Constitution, in the Declaration of Rights, and it says it verbatim, the pursuit of happiness. Now, when they tell me to put on a mask, or they tell me to put an injection in my arm, is that a violation of my right? You bet. Okay? So, go to the Declaration of Independence, go to the Bill of Rights. Now, we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights later. We got the Declaration of Rights in Idaho. That's Article 1 of the Idaho Constitution. Art Macomber was here a while back, and he had these printed up by himself and handed these out to people. I got a copy from him. I use it all the flippin' time. I'm planning on printing some of these and making them available. They're a little bit pricey for a little tiny book. I do have some of these, which are great, and they're reasonably inexpensive. If you want a copy, $2 for a donation to defray my cost. Okay, that includes shipping to get them here, a couple bucks. But these are going to be a little more money because they're pretty thick. Okay. Anyway, so you got Declaration of Rights. You've got Supreme Court cases. We've got Black's Law Dictionary, which is kind of the Bible of legal definitions. Okay. And then you got memorandums of law by acknowledged authorities. And then you have the Federalist Papers. If you want to understand the Constitution, read the Federalist Papers. They're a hard read. If you've ever tried, they're a hard read, I got to admit.
Quick question, Dennis.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers? I've seen both books.
Well, the Federalist Papers I've read. I haven't read the Anti-Federalist. I really need to, but I'm too busy reading other things right now. And so I got a copy, intending to read it. But The Federalist Papers were the primarily in the region of New York and that were debating, trying to get ratification of the Constitution. And so they were very pro-federal government. But they were very careful about it too. But they wanted a central federal government because we needed a combined nation to be able to repel a foreign invasion and other things. Okay, so the Anti-Federalist papers were those that were opposed to the federal government. They wanted a weak federal government. That's the difference. Okay, the Constitution is the body and letter of which the Declaration of Independence is the thought and spirit. It is always safe to read the Constitution in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. So when you're reading the Constitution, you're saying, this doesn't sound right. Go back and look at the Declaration and see what it has to say. And if there's a law that you feel like, this doesn't make sense to me, go read the Declaration of Independence. Read the Declaration and understand the spirit of it. It's the spirit of our law, of our organic law. We are bound to interpret the Constitution in the light of as the law existed at the time it was adopted. That's called constructionist. That's called a constructionist, isn't it? Theory of law. Now, today we think that we have a living Constitution. Okay, and that's the term they use for it. So that they can modify it and they can take away from the spirit of the Declaration. Okay. But the fact is when that thing was written, it was signed, and it's burned into the tree that made that document. And it's a contract. How do you feel about making a contract here, and then you want to come back 2 years later and say, I'm not happy with this, I want to change the terms of the agreement? Whether it's 2 years or 200 years, or 250 years, we made an agreement, right? Okay. The principles of the Constitution are designed to be permanent. The powers of the legislature are defined and limited, and that those limits may not be forgotten. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the laws of the United States shall be made only in pursuance of the Constitution. So if a law violates the constraints, the limitations of the Constitution, it's void. That's Marbury versus Madison. Very important case. The Federalist Papers is a complete commentary on our Constitution. The part which two of the authors, John Jay and James Madison, that they performed in framing the Constitution, put it, meaning the Federalist Papers, very much in their power to explain the views with which it was framed. That's why the Federalist Papers are so important. There exists a prevailing and increased now, let me tell you, tell me this doesn't sound like our day. There exists a prevailing and increasing distrust of public institutions and alarm for private rights, which are echoed from one end of the continent to the other. A number of citizens are united by some common passion adverse to the rights of other citizens. Tell me that was written by James Madison. It's Federalist Paper number 10. Tell me that they didn't see our day and that the same principles weren't true in 1776 or 1785 or 6, something like that, when they were drafting the Constitution. The reason is human nature doesn't change. So we look to the contemporary works around the time of the Constitution. This was written by Bouvier. I don't remember his first name, but Bouvier in 1918, I believe, wrote a 3-volume dictionary that is the definitions that were used during the time of the Constitution. So he was an authority, and Bouvier still is referred to. The law of nature, or natural law, is that which God gives to all men, known by the dictate of right reason alone. No human laws are valid if opposed to the law of nature, and all laws which are binding derive their authority either directly or indirectly from natural law. Again, Bouvier, he says, absolute rights are those which belong to each man. As an individual, liberty is an absolute right, which man holds from nature. That was written in 1918, like I say, okay? Black's Law, I talked briefly about Black's Law. So I'm just bouncing, looking at natural rights and rights from a couple of different perspectives here. Natural rights are those which grow out of the nature of man, as distinguished from those rights created by law and depend upon civilized society. Okay?
We have a godless society. Doesn't help.
The individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. His rights existed long before the organization of the state. Now the word state there can refer to the federal government or the state government. The state means government, okay? Federal or, okay? Hale versus Henkel. Okay, so when we talk about rights, they're self-evident, okay? And there's just a list of them. And you all know that without me even reading it. So the question is it safe to say that self-evident rights exist which are not expressly mentioned in the Constitution? Yes, those are called implied rights, aren't they? Implied rights. So this is out of Idaho. This is the city of Pocatello, Adams versus city of Pocatello. It was an Idaho Supreme Court case. The right to operate a motor vehicle, travel, upon the public streets and highways is not a mere privilege. Do you hear about the privilege to drive? Okay, now there's more to that. I'm not going to go into that real deep. I'm going to just bump on it. It is a right or liberty, the enjoyment of which is protected by the guarantees of the federal and state government. You don't go do this unless you understand the law well on this, okay? You need to understand it or you'll be in trouble. So, rights and duties. My rights end where your rights begin. Right? Okay? My rights end where your rights begin. Nature demands restitution for harm done, and this originated in the law of Moses, or earlier, perhaps, and intent qualifies a crime as, or a harm as being criminal. So if I intend to hit you, that's battery. If I hit you by mistake, that's an accident, maybe. So,
well,
yes.
My rights begin where your rights, what was that again?
Oh.
My rights end where your rights begin.
Yeah.
We're using that a lot with the masks out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that line of reasoning right there.
Yeah.
You're, because you aren't covering your face, you're hurting others. That
Well,
you're coming in contact with.
that's a little bit different argument,
Yeah.
and I won't go a lot into that, but the answer is you have the right to defend yourself. Put on a mask.
Yeah.
Or leave the room.
Yeah.
That's the answer to that.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to mention, did I already tell you that? Yeah, I did. I told you about the agents or the subcontractors. Okay. Bill of Rights. This is kind of cool. It's not a bill of privileges. And the evidence of that is if you go to Article, I think it's 4 of the U.S. Constitution, there is a proviso in there that says that the citizens of of the separate states have the same privileges and immunities that are available to citizens in the other states. So they understood that, okay? But they didn't put that in the Bill of Rights, did they? They didn't say privileges and immunities, and we'll get into that in a second. Not included the Bill of Rights was not in the original text of the Constitution, was it? I think that was written in 1887, and the Bill of Rights were added, I believe, in 1787, and added in 1789. So, the Bill of Rights were added to protect who? Were they federal citizens or were they state citizens? It originated in the states, and it was state citizens that it was talking about. And then finally, those rights are secured to you by the Idaho Constitution, and I've got 2 cases there mentioned that explain that. This is the preamble of the Bill of Rights. It says, the conventions of a in fact, it's in this little booklet here, it's in the preamble they included. The conventions of the number of states expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further restricted clauses should be added. That was the preamble of the Bill of Rights. It's there with the Bill of Rights. They explained why they were doing it. They didn't want their liberties being abused. So, okay, we made it that far. We know what a right is. Would you like to know a little more about privileges? We're getting late. It's 10 to 7.
That's not late.
10 to 8.
Past my bedtime. All right. If you're okay, I'll keep going, and I'll try to move through this again fairly quickly. This is an important case. It really explains an important principle that we just touched on briefly earlier. It's from Poindexter versus Greenhow. It's an 1885 case, and it happened not long after the Civil War and the passage of the 14th Amendment. It states, the statute is not constitutionally void. In other words, this statute is valid. It's a double negative. It's valid. It's constitutional. It is a constitutional statute. But the statute is challenged here because its application is a violation of a constitutional right. Well, how can it be valid and yet violate a constitutional right? Let's go on. Many of the tax laws of a state which are valid are void in particular cases. Who'd guess? Because they deprive the person of a right secured to him by the Constitution of the United States, or we could add, by the Constitution of Idaho. So, if President Biden's executive orders are valid in some cases, does it mean it's valid against me? And the answer is absolutely not. Okay? It's called a misapplication of law. It's a misapplied law. And so whenever you're asked to sign a contract with the state, you should ask yourself, is this a misapplication of law to me, to my person, as a Idaho citizen? Now, just quick note, I don't say citizen of the state of Idaho. State of Idaho is the agent of the people. It is a municipal corporation, basically. It's a corporation. The Republic, Idaho, is the people in this room and the land we stand on. That's the Republic. It's a thing. It's real. And the corporation is an artificial corporation. It's an artificial entity.
Executive order was he did not allow anybody to say Merry Christmas, and I just went into the post office and wished everybody Merry Christmas, and they weren't allowed to wish me Merry Christmas.
Isn't that interesting?
Executive order said they weren't allowed.
That was in the post office?
Yes.
That just happened recently?
No, that was under Obama.
Oh, interesting. Isn't that interesting? That she was saying that she went in the post office and under Obama, she could wish them Merry Christmas, but they couldn't return that Merry Christmas. Isn't that interesting? Interesting. Okay. So, we have 50 union states, and every union state is a sovereign nation. And a nation is also known by the term state. That's where the term state. If you talk about Germany, it's a state. And Britain is a state. They're nations. Well, guess what? Idaho is a sovereign nation, and it's known as a state. Okay, so the United States, in fact, in the Declaration, if I'm not mistaken, the Union of States, union is lowercase. It's not an uppercase union. And those are just interesting things. The words matter. Okay, so in the states, we have the common law if we apply for it. In most courts, it is presumed that you are not there in the common law. It is presumed that you are there under administrative law, under statutory law. You have to raise that. Again, that's another discussion for another day. We have what are called federal territories and possessions. That includes Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C. I've wondered, quite frankly, all of those protesters that went there, that are in jail there, they are not in state territory. They are in a federal possession of the United States. And I wonder if they have the protection of the Constitution there. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting question.
Wow.
Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and all these different territories. Oh, and the post office. And the federal building. And the federal courthouses. Yes?
What about Indian reservations?
They are a separate entity, and they are recognized separately in the Constitution. And they are addressed separately in these kinds of executive orders. They are a separate entity. They are considered separate, independent nations until they take federal money. So post office, the FBI complex in Pocatello, anyway, military bases. Okay, those are all federal territorial jurisdiction, and they fall under the what is called exclusive jurisdiction of Congress. And in those territories, they make all of the laws, and they have the right to either give privileges or to deny privileges.
Does that apply to airports too?
I'm sorry?
Does that apply to airports too?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. The fact of the matter is, once you get on the plane, you're under admiralty law. An airplane operates under like a ship, and he is the king of that vehicle when it's in transit. So when he issues a law, it is the law. He has full power to throw you overboard for mutiny or whatever, you know.
That's right.
Yeah.
What about finding out like government facilities?
You know, I don't know that question because personally it isn't my problem. And I'm not saying that to sound, it's just I've got enough problems that I'm studying already.
Yeah,
it's a separate question, but it's a good question and I don't know the answer to it. But it appears that the federal courts think that he doesn't have the right to violate your constitutional rights, even on federal property. It appears that the courts are taking that position.
8 cases.
Thank God for that. Huh. Okay.
I think the city of Idaho Falls owns the airport, don't they? But I'm sure they took a lot of money to get it.
Absolutely. So it's hard to know. Now, in 2001, we had the Patriot Act. And I don't know, it was an overwhelming majority in Congress that supported that. And people were afraid. How well does fear work? It's 20 years later. And we're seeing a repeat. We see one generation. What we've done is skipped a generation from 2001 to 2021. And we're seeing, in fact, in 2001, when it happened, I think it was 2003, 2 years later, when they passed the Patriot Act. We're doing the same thing right now. Okay? So, privileges and immunities. Do we want to be like the monkey? He's a good-looking monkey. All right. So, let me tell you a quick story. This was a story by Louis D. Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court Justice from 1916 to 1939. He was in the court when all of this crap was happening to destroy our common law rights. Okay, we moved from common law into civil statutory law. It's when the Federal Reserve was created. It was during the period when the Social Security Act was passed. It was during the period when gold standard was dropped. This man was a fighter for your constitutional rights. Let me read you this quick story. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, near the Supreme Court chambers. Oh, near the Supreme Court chambers is a toll bridge across the Potomac. That's the one on the left. When in a rush, I pay the dollar toll. I'm sorry, the toll bridge is on the right. When in a rush, I pay the dollar toll and get home early. However, I usually drive outside the downtown section of the city and cross the Potomac on a free bridge. That's the one on the left. This bridge was placed outside the downtown Washington, D.C. area to serve a useful social service, getting drivers to drive the extra mile and help alleviate congestion during rush hour. If I went over the toll bridge and through the barrier without paying the toll, I would be committing tax evasion. If, however, I drive the extra mile, drive outside the city of Washington to the free bridge, I am using a legitimate, logical, and suitable method of tax avoidance. It's true. Okay? And I am performing a useful social service by doing so. For my tax evasion, I should be punished. For my tax avoidance, I should be commended. Wow. The tragedy of life, this is the kicker, the tragedy of life today is that so few people know that the free bridge even exists. I drive a mile to the free bridge. I'm using a legitimate tax avoidance. For evasion, I should be punished. For avoidance, I should be commended. Do you remember the Walker Farms dispute that happened a few years back? The IRS sued them, and they were trying to, I don't remember what the details were on it, but they were trying to sue them for millions of dollars, and they went to court. Guess what? They won. Walker won. Because they were using the tax laws to avoid taxes, and that's what the laws were written for. And they're written for you too. But the question is, first of all, does it apply to you in the first place? That's the $24 question. Okay? Okay. Or what parts of it apply to you? Okay. So back to privilege is an exemption from a burden that you're otherwise subjected to. Okay? Rights and privileges are not the same. Here you are. Somebody mentioned it here. A request of exemption is an act of fealty. You are bowing before a dictator, a king of some sort. Fealty is fidelity as a vassal. Okay? That's what that means. It's feudal system. It's the feudal system that existed in Europe. Okay? So, what do we have going on today is what is called a de facto democratic socialist democracy or something. It's a rule by majority. That's de facto means that it is in fact operating. It may not have the law behind it. Does it sound like our day? It really does, doesn't it? This is what's going on in America. De jure constitutional republic is what was operating now. There have always been challenges to the republic, always have. The Civil War is a great example of it. Anyway, Civil War is a great example of it. De jure, it means a lawful, in law, operating republic. So, I'm living in a de facto socialist democracy. The question, what can I do as an individual to remain free, even if everybody around me wants socialism? How many people do you see that still want all the perks? And are they willing to give up their liberties? You see it with the kids all the time. You see it with the kids that want the federal government to pay off their school loan, right? There's a good example, a big one right now. Okay? Equity. All right. So what do you do about it? Okay. We did already do that one. So here we are. Okay? We have been brought up from the time we were infants that this is what it's all about. Now, I love America, and I love the Constitution, and I'm so grateful for those patriots that paid the price so that I could be free. But what they did was they paid the price so I could wear this hat. That doesn't mean the other one is ignored. But this is the one where you find your common law rights protected, right here. When you step onto Washington, D.C. territory, beware. You have just left the state. You've left state protections and you've stepped into federal jurisdiction. Okay? Now, generally, they have to be pretty civil there or they'd be pulled out of office. But right now, they're not being civil there. Maybe they will come out of office. Okay? So that's the risk you take. But so what hats do I want to wear? Now, you'll see privileges there in the bottom right-hand corner. Maybe medical licensing. There's some questions that in my mind I don't have completely resolved, but I know if you become an Air Force pilot, you are a federal employee. Actually, you're a federal officer. And federal officers are under federal jurisdiction, congressional exclusive jurisdiction. Okay? And they did it by contract. They signed a contract. Would you step forward and take the oath of office when you join the military? That was signing the contract. It was done physically, symbolically, okay? So, just real brief, when I really got re-engaged in this, I've been doing this for a long time. I've studied this a long time, but 4 years ago I got jury summons duty. And I read the document and I thought, I don't like what I'm reading here. Okay, that was that intuitive. I don't like what it's saying here. It talked about U.S. citizen. If I say I'm a U.S. citizen, just quick to that, it may confer congressional exclusive jurisdiction. So what I did is I prepared documents and I sent it to the courthouse and I said, I'm happy to do this. I believe in jury duty and I'll be there, but I want you to know I'm not coming as a citizen under federal congressional exclusive jurisdiction. I'm coming as an Idaho citizen. I said, I just started reading some material on this, so it was okay for me to say that. I just had been introduced to some of this stuff, and I said, I'm just letting you know I have some legal questions in my mind, and in signing this questionnaire, I don't want to waive my rights. That's what I said. I don't want to waive my rights. That's a common law reservation of rights.
Did they say you're excused?
They did in the end. So I put them on notice that I was challenging the status that they were requiring of me as a jury member. And I said, I am studying this. As soon as I have this sorted out, I will advise you of my decision. And so when I had it figured out, I prepared a document. I think it was about, now I did the research with a group that kind of sponsors this kind of thinking, and they had a brief already. And I studied the brief and I thought, yeah, I can accept the terms of this brief. Now when I sign something, I read it, and if I don't believe what's on the document, I'm not going to sign it, okay? So I read the brief, and I sent it, and I got another copy of the questionnaire, and I changed the way I filled out the questionnaire. I changed some of the answers, and I said, by U.S. citizen, I mean Idaho citizen. And by resident, I mean domiciliary, or a person domiciled on the ground, the land of Idaho, okay? Because those are terms of art, okay? So I sent it back into them, and I said, okay, I'm ready to serve. Let me know what I can do. And they took it. I think they've seen this happen before. I don't think I'm the first guy to do it. I just don't know anybody else doing it. Okay? But they took it, and they were nice. Okay? And they said, yeah, we accept these terms.
You can make changes to an agreement.
Huh?
You can make changes to an agreement.
Yeah.
And
well, I did have her sign for it, so I had evidence of delivery. Okay? I had evidence of delivery. Okay? Everything was fine, okay? And then I made a copy and I filed it with the county recorder. So there was a public record that I had done this. There was evidence on record that I had done it. Okay, that makes sense?
Yep.
Okay, so if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I really recommend that you get a copy of Black's Law. Now, on the bottom right-hand corner, you see there's a PDF version available. You could download it. The cheapest thing I found online was about $50. The most expensive was about $100. The reason I like the 5th, I think they've actually got an 11th edition out now. I like the 6th edition because it has what is called annotations on the definitions. And what an annotation is when it gives the definition, it gives you a couple of court cases that was decided in. And that's why I like annotations. And lawyers use annotated documentation all the time, okay? So, Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition. If you're reading the Constitution, if you're reading statutory law, don't ever assume you know the meaning of a word. Did you know that the word person means more than just flesh and blood people? In statutory law, most often it refers to an artificial entity, corporation, LLC, trust, those kinds of things. Those are all artificial persons. The word natural person means flesh and blood person. And if you go to the Idaho Constitution, it only occurs once where natural person occurs in the Idaho Constitution. Only once. And it has to do with tax law. But if that tax law violates a personal liberty, is it valid? Even in the Constitution, it can certainly be challenged. Whether they'll decide in your favor or not is another question. But anyway, so this is your homework. This is your homework assignment. You saw Carl Miller, Know Your Constitution. There's 3 sessions, about 2 hours each. That is the easiest one to do because he does such a down-to-earth, remarkable presentation. I just love the guy. The second one, I just ran across this book. I have done so much studying over the years, and there's a lot of confusing stuff out there, I've got to admit. This guy is a lawyer who was a prosecutor. I don't recall where exactly. His name is Melvin Stamper. He is a lawyer who wrote the book called Fruit from a Poisonous Tree. It is not like reading Reader's Digest. It is a challenging read, but it's very well done. Better than most that I've ever found. Very well written. $20 on Amazon. There is a PDF. I couldn't wait for the book to show up because I read the reviews about it, so I downloaded a PDF. And I ordered the book because I want to support him. But I read the PDF while I was waiting. Okay? It's a great read. It's a great read. And then the last one, this is the complicated one, and there's a lot of reading in it. But if the other 2 interest you, and it strikes home with you, there's a group called sedm.org. And SEDM has hundreds of volumes in it. You will spend a lot of time getting to it if you try to sort through it all. You want to go to the one that's called Pathway to Freedom if you decide to do it. It is a Christian group. You can join their group free, but if you want to get access to a lot of the documents, you have to pay a yearly annual fee, which is like $220, which in my book, for what they provided, is a remarkable price for what that's worth. And that, you've been really patient, and thank you for joining me and for our discussion tonight. I'm all done. Thank you.
Dennis, great job. Just thank everybody for coming. Who's heard of Wall Builders? And it's Tim Barton and Dave as his dad. Admittedly, I don't know them that well, but I'm learning about them. And actually, we're going to have Tim here on the 8th of January. And so it's a Saturday evening, and we hope to actually pack this whole place. So if you can invite everybody to come, I think you'll find it very informative and very good. And with this, Dennis, let me shake your hand. I know he's been trying to do this and wanting to do this, and he's going to actually, I think, have a series of these he's trying to put together.
If people are interested.
if people are interested. So do we think we're interested in having him come back and continue with phase 2? Yeah, that's it. Perfect. And there are some cookies up here, and David and Lovely, they brought them, so I thank you very much. Like I say, I usually starve everybody, but they wanted this week and everything up. Thank you for bringing those. Pardon? What?
Bart.
Oh, January 8th.
8.
Yeah, it'll be it's on a Saturday, and 7 o'clock in the evening, but, you know, we'll keep people posted and all that. And with that, if you please sign in, make sure I have your email and can read your email, and I'll keep you posted what's going on with that and what's going on with all of our other things. So with that, thanks everybody. Hope to see you again. And like I say, next week's going to be an interesting week. We have Brian Smith on Wednesday, Ammon Bundy on Thursday. Come and listen to him. Ask him tough questions. Be straightforward today. All the stuff that we're going through right now, it's because of the people in those offices. So anyway, thank you. See you later.